What if I told you that in the Wild West, a simple 10-step walk from your front door could be the last journey of your life? In the era of frontier exploration, the silence of a night storm was deceptive, and the darkness concealed invisible walls that killed faster than an enemy bullet. Today we're going back to those harsh times when nature was the most ruthless judge for the settlers of the Great Plains. Watch the video to the end to learn how experienced trappers and pioneer families tried to cheat death using only ropes and intuition, and why a simple mistake in orientation turned a strong man into a helpless victim of the elements. To begin with, I will reveal to you the most closely guarded secret of survival on the plains, one that changes your entire perception of space. In the open spaces of the Wild West, such as Nebraska or Dakota, a winter storm did not just bring cold weather, it completely erased the very concept of reality. When a blizzard, known as a whiteout, began, a person instantly lost the ability to distinguish between the sky and the ground. It was a state of complete disorientation, when sight became a useless sense in a matter of seconds. In such a situation, a person's vestibular system began to malfunction due to the lack of visual landmarks. A settler who stepped out of his hut saw only an endless, milky void in front of him, with no top, bottom, or cardinal directions. Even sound behaves strangely in such weather, reflecting off dense streams of snow and creating false acoustic illusions. Every direction seemed correct, but in fact they all led nowhere. Many pioneers underestimated this danger, believing that their sense of direction would help them find their way back. However, in stormy conditions, the human brain tends to make the same fatal mistake, walking in circles. Due to the natural asymmetry of the human body, the steps of one foot are always slightly longer than the other. Without visual control over the horizon, the traveler began to describe an arc with a diameter of only a few dozen meters. This biological feature became a death sentence just a few steps away from safety. A settler could circle around his hut for hours, unaware that warmth and light were literally just beyond a thin layer of snow. With each circle, his strength left him, and his confidence that he was walking straight only grew. It was a trap created by nature and human physiology. Do you think it is possible to train your sense of direction to counteract this natural illusion? Share your opinion in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new stories about the harsh life of the frontier. Are you ready to learn the shocking truth about what happens to the human mind in the eye of the storm? Night on the frontier was a challenge in itself, but a night storm turned familiar surroundings into a nightmarish setting. When a settler realized he couldn't find the door to his cabin, an ancient panic mechanism kicked in. Fear blocked rational thinking, causing people to perform chaotic and useless actions. Instead of stopping and trying to analyze the situation, people often started running. Running in deep snow and strong winds instantly depleted the body's energy reserves. Breathing became irregular, the cold air burned the lungs, and the heart worked at its limit. Every second of such activity brought the moment of complete physical collapse closer. Panic made them ignore even the few clues that nature could give them. For example, the direction of the wind could serve as a guide if a person remained calm. But in a state of panic, the wind seemed to be blowing from all directions at once. The fear of freezing pushed people to make rash moves in random directions, which ultimately deprived them of any chance of rescue. Many victims were later found just 10 or 20 meters from the porch of their own home. Their tracks in the snow formed a confusing maze, evidence of a complete loss of control. It was not just freezing, it was a psychological victory of the elements over the human mind. The shadows of the night and the howling wind created illusions of persecution, causing people to rush about in open spaces. Do you think a modern flashlight or compass would have helped a person of that time avoid such a fate in conditions of zero visibility? In the next chapter, you will learn about a unique method that experienced hunters used to avoid becoming victims of their own disorientation. You've probably never heard of this unique secret, even though it saved the lives of entire families in the Rocky Mountains. Knowing the treachery of blizzards, wise settlers developed a system of safety ropes between buildings. One end of the rope was attached to the door of the hut, and the other to the entrance to the barn or well. Only by holding on to this rope could a person venture outside in bad weather, knowing that their eyesight would inevitably fail them. However, tragedies occurred precisely when this system was neglected due to overconfidence. Often, the head of the family would decide to go out just for a minute to check the bolt or fetch firewood. He believed that after years of living on the farm, he knew every inch of the land and could find his way with his eyes closed. This overconfidence became fatal when the first gust of wind knocked a person off their feet and covered their own tracks with snow. As soon as a person let go of the door handle and took 3 steps to the side, the hut disappeared. In the Wild West, there were no streetlights or neighbors whose lights could serve as a beacon. The environment turned into a homogeneous mass, where the sounds of family cries were drowned out by the roar of the storm. The rope was the only real bridge between life and death, but it required discipline and recognition of one's own powerlessness in the face of nature. There are records of cases where people got lost simply by stepping around the corner of their own house to relieve themselves. Without a reference point, they could not understand which way to turn to get back to the wall. They began to feel their way with their hands, but only encountered the icy needles of the wind. Gradually, their movements became more and more sluggish, and their brains began to sink into a state of numbness. Like this, if you think that something as simple as a rope is the most ingenious invention of the frontier era, write in the comments if you would risk going outside without safety equipment in such conditions. What you are about to learn will change your understanding of how exactly those lost in the storm met their end. Hypothermia affected the frontier settlers in a very insidious and gradual manner. At first, the body tried to warm itself up by shivering involuntarily, using up the remaining glucose in the muscles. But as soon as the internal body temperature dropped below a critical level, a stage of false well-being set in. Blood flowed away from the extremities to vital organs, causing the hands and feet to lose sensitivity. The person stopped feeling the cold as pain, which was replaced by a strange apathy. In this state, people often did things that didn't make sense, like sitting down to rest right in the snow. They thought they were just really tired and needed to sleep a little before continuing on their way. The most shocking phenomenon was the so-called paradoxical undressing. In the terminal stage of hypothermia, the blood vessels suddenly dilated, causing a powerful rush of blood to the skin. The freezing person began to feel as if they were burning alive from unbearable heat. In the last minutes of their lives, people tore off their jackets and shirts in an attempt to cool down, which only accelerated heat loss. Hunters and trappers found frozen settlers without their outer clothing, which gave rise to legends about evil spirits of the plains. In fact, it was just a physiological reaction of an exhausted body. Deprived of clear consciousness, the person did not understand that his sensations were directly opposite to reality. The brain, suffering from a lack of oxygen and energy, produced its last hallucinations, taking the victim into a world of dreams. Do you think the person realized at that moment that they were making a mistake? Or did their brain completely shut down their instinct for self-preservation? In the next chapter, you will learn why even the presence of a reliable shelter nearby did not guarantee salvation. Many believe that death on the frontier only befell those who ventured far into the open prairie. But this is a dangerous and deceptive misconception. The reality was much more frightening. Tragedy statistics show that a huge number of people died very close to home. Sometimes the distance to safety was measured in a few steps. This made such deaths particularly cruel. Often, people died within 15 meters of their own doorstep. Such proximity to home created a false sense of security. People believed that they could return at any moment. This lulled even those who were well aware of the harsh local weather into a false sense of security. People rushed outside unprepared. They did not take warm clothes with them, thinking that they would only be outside for a short time. Often, they were wearing only light indoor clothing. It was impossible to comprehend that a few minutes could be fatal. But the storm left no time to realize the mistake. Returning home proved impossible. Storms on the Great Plains could reach such force that the wind literally knocked a grown man off his feet. Gusts came suddenly and without warning. Falling into the snow, a person lost their bearings. They no longer understood where their home was and where the open terrain was. The space around them turned into chaos. While a person tried to get up and wipe the sticky snow from their eyes, time was running out. In a matter of seconds, the wind covered their own tracks. The only thread connecting them to home disappeared. The familiar yard changed beyond recognition. In a minute, it became hostile and foreign territory. The walls of the hut, made of turf or logs, were highly soundproof. They kept out the noise of the wind inside and the cries outside. The people inside heard only the crackling of the fire and their conversations. They had no idea that a tragedy was unfolding nearby. The house became an island of silence amid the fury of the elements. The family could eat dinner or warm themselves by the fireplace in peace. No one guessed that a father, brother, or son was fighting for his life right outside the door. The cries were drowned out by the roar of the wind. No one heard the cries for help. This deafness was one of the most terrifying aspects of life on the frontier. Even if a person stumbled upon an obstacle, it did not always save them. A fence, a wagon, or a barn could give false hope. In the darkness and snow dust, it was impossible to understand where you were. A person did not know which way to go. Sometimes people would start walking along a fence, hoping to reach a house. But because they were disoriented, they would choose the wrong direction. Instead of finding salvation, they would wander even further into the night. Every minute took away their warmth and strength. Decisions had to be made on the verge of exhaustion. All this happened in conditions of severe shortage of time and warmth. The cold left no room for long deliberation. One mistake could be fatal. That is why the frontier was merciless. Even one's own backyard could be the last place in a person's life. Are you ready for the shocking truth about how Native American tribes, such as the Apache and Sioux, viewed winter storms? The indigenous peoples of these lands developed a completely different approach to the elements over the centuries. For them, a storm was a time of absolute peace and stillness inside a teepee or wigwam. They knew that fighting the wind in open spaces was pointless, and they never left their shelter unless absolutely necessary. The Indians used the natural landscape to protect their camps, setting them up in low-lying areas or behind natural folds in the terrain. If a hunter was caught in a storm while traveling, he did not try to make his way back to camp through the blizzard. Instead, he would seek shelter in thickets or burrow into the snow, creating a temporary air pocket. This allowed him to conserve body heat and wait for the active phase of the storm to pass. Settlers, on the other hand, often tried to act against nature, striving to complete their tasks at all costs. Trappers who had lived alongside the tribes for a long time adopted their tactics and survived more often than others. They knew that the best tactic in a storm was to become invisible and motionless. However, those who had just arrived from the East Coast did not have this knowledge. The difference in approach often determined who would see spring and who would remain in the archives as another victim of the frontier. The Indians perceived snow as an insulator that could protect them if they knew how to use it. The settlers, on the other hand, saw it only as an enemy that had to be defeated by force and perseverance. This psychological difference was critical in matters of survival on the frontier of civilization. What happens if a person decides to wait out a storm in an open field, using only their knowledge of nature? In the following chapters, we will examine specific cases that form the basis of the safety rules of that time. One of the most famous disasters in U.S. history was the blizzard that occurred in January 1888, also known as the school blizzard. The temperature dropped by dozens of degrees in just a few hours, catching people off guard in the middle of the workday. Hundreds of people died simply because they were trying to get from one building to another. Children and teachers were trapped inside schools or died trying to walk to their homes across the street. The tragedy of that day showed that even knowledge of the area does not guarantee safety in extreme cold. People left warm buildings and instantly lost their bearings due to the strong wind and icy debris. Those who decided to stay inside the buildings survived despite the cold and hunger. Those who ventured outside in search of loved ones often joined the list of victims. After this event, the rules of life on the frontier were revised at the legislative and domestic levels. Families began to build enclosed passageways between their homes and outbuildings, if they could afford it. It became a rule never to let children go out alone if characteristic clouds appeared on the horizon. This bitter experience cost the lives of hundreds of ordinary farmers and their families. The archives have preserved stories of people who found salvation by burying themselves in haystacks or hiding under the bodies of fallen horses. These were extreme measures that only the most determined individuals resorted to. Most simply froze to death, unable to resist the paralyzing cold. The Great Blizzard became a symbol of how fragile human life is in the face of powerful atmospheric phenomena. At night during a storm, any source of light could be both a salvation and a deadly trap. In the dark, people instinctively gravitate toward light, considering it a sign of safety. But in a blizzard, this rule no longer applied. Light could deceive and lead one nowhere. That is why experienced people treated it with caution. The light of a candle in the window of a hut through a thick curtain of snow looked like a lonely, flickering dot. It was impossible to determine the distance to it by eye. It seemed to a person that the light was very close. In reality, it could be hundreds of meters away. Sometimes the light source was an optical illusion. The refraction of light in ice crystals and snow dust distorted reality. The fire could seem closer or farther than it actually was. It could split in two or move. Such false projections confused even a sober and experienced person. In a blizzard, vision ceased to be a reliable guide. Sometimes people saw lights from neighboring farms that were hidden behind hills in normal weather. In a storm, these lights seemed to float out of the darkness. A person would start walking toward them, not realizing that they were going in the opposite direction from their own home. A few wrong steps could change their fate. Returning became impossible. Night hallucinations caused by hypothermia exacerbated the danger. The brain began to conjure up images of warmth and comfort. People imagined brightly lit rooms, stoves, and fireplaces. These visions seemed absolutely real. The lost person rushed toward the imagined salvation. In an attempt to reach the imaginary light, the person often began to run. This led to a sharp loss of their last reserves of strength. Their breathing became irregular. Their heart was overloaded. After a few minutes, complete exhaustion set in. This was one of the most insidious aspects of night blizzards in the Wild West. Experienced pioneers warned that in such conditions, one could not trust one's eyes. They advised relying on touch and hearing, if possible. It was necessary to feel the direction of the wind and the shape of the ground beneath one's feet. Sometimes touching a fence or wall would save you, but such landmarks were rare. The roar of the wind often drowned out all other sounds. People could no longer hear even their own breathing. Their thoughts became confused and lost clarity. It was almost impossible to find one's bearings in such a cacophony. Panic led to wrong decisions. The only reliable way to signal was to strike metal objects. People hit rails, bells, or pieces of farm equipment. Metal made a sharp, piercing sound. It could cut through the wind. But even this method did not always work. In strong storms, the sound was distorted and changed direction. A person could walk toward it and end up even further from the source. This completely confused them and robbed them of hope. Even signals became unreliable. Night amplified every mistake. The light that was supposed to bring hope often became the last thing a person saw. Before losing consciousness, many remembered bright lights. They seemed like salvation, but they were a deception. These stories were passed on as a warning. Those who tried to light torches or lanterns on the street quickly realized the futility of the idea. The wind extinguished any flame in seconds. Fire could not withstand the onslaught of the elements. The night frontier did not forgive mistakes and gave no second chances to those who found themselves alone in the darkness and snow. The chronology of frontier development includes the Great Depression, when thousands of workers moved across the country in search of work. These people often had no permanent homes and spent the night in makeshift camps by the railroad tracks. For them, night storms were even more dangerous, as their shelters were often made of cardboard, boards, or fabric. Leaving such a shelter to gather firewood often ended in tragedy. Migrant workers, or hobos, did not have the wilderness survival skills that trappers or Native Americans possessed. They came from cities and often did not understand the specifics of the Great Plains climate. A mistake in choosing a place to camp could cost the entire group their lives if a storm caught them in the open. Attempts to find more reliable shelter in the dark led to people losing sight of the railroad tracks, their only point of reference. Many frozen bodies were found along the tracks, just a few meters from the embankment. They tried to walk along the rails, but in a blizzard, they easily slipped into the ditches and could not get back out. The cold and lack of proper nutrition made their bodies extremely vulnerable to hypothermia. These people became invisible victims of social history, whose names rarely appeared in official reports. Their experience once again confirmed the rule. In a storm, any movement without a firm reference point is deadly. The lack of family support and warm homes made their situation catastrophic. The social history of the frontier is not only about heroic deeds, but also about thousands of quiet deaths from cold in the shadow of great construction projects and railroads.
We're ready for the snow now.
Today we look at these events through the prism of history, but the lessons of the frontier remain relevant. Modern technology allows us to avoid many dangers, but human nature and physiology remain the same. We are still prone to panic in extreme conditions and still lose our bearings in the whiteout. The history of the Wild West is, above all, a history of human adaptation to a hostile environment. Every tragedy in a cabin or on the prairie taught settlers to value collective safety and foresight. Ropes between houses, indoor firewood supplies, and knowledge of the signs of hypothermia became part of the cultural code of the inhabitants of these regions. This legacy was passed down from generation to generation, shaping the unique character of people who were accustomed to relying only on themselves and proven methods. Understanding why leaving the cabin was deadly helps us better appreciate the scale of the difficulties faced by the pioneers. These were not just everyday inconveniences, but a daily struggle for the right to breathe and stay warm. Every surviving house from that time is a monument to the will and caution of those who were able to withstand the elements. We have explored the physiology, psychology, and social aspects of surviving storms in the Wild West. We hope this information has given you a new perspective on the frontier era. History teaches us that even the simplest mistakes can have enormous consequences if they are made in the wrong place at the wrong time. Our story about the deadly dangers of night storms in the Wild West is coming to an end. We have seen how the harsh nature of the frontier tested people's endurance and how the price of a single mistake could be exorbitantly high. These stories remind us of the importance of knowledge and respect for the forces of nature. Which of the settlers' mistakes do you think was the most fatal, and could it have been avoided under the circumstances? Share your thoughts in the comments and suggest topics for our future videos. What would you like to learn more about? The daily life of migrant workers or protecting farms from raids? Subscribe to the channel to continue exploring the history of the American frontier with us.